So in this video, we're going to talk about the illegal drug market and the fact that the illegal drug market, although it's different, does have a structure. So it's not just a random occurrence of people and production facilities. There is actually a structure to the illegal drug market. Now, unfortunately, there is not actually a black market. So when I was growing up, every time I heard the term black market, I did actually visualize like some dark corner of some city that they called the black market where things were sold, and I was wondering where this thing was and why we couldn't find it. Sadly, there is no black market, but there are marketplaces. So there are virtual marketplaces where illicit drugs are sold, which is a virtual marketplace is any relationship between a buyer and seller. This can include online digital relationships. And there are physical marketplaces. And a physical marketplace may not be a black market in general, but it's where the transactions are made. It could be a street corner, it could be an alley, it could be literally any physical place, even if it's just two people. Now, illegal drugs are typically sold in a virtual marketplace, so it's any relationship between a buyer and seller. Although those physical transactions, when a drug is passed over to the consumer and the money goes over to the seller, could be considered a temporary physical marketplace if it's done in person. Now, illegal drug markets have three key features: form, price, and product quality, which we'll go through in turn. So form. Illegal drug markets are decentralized systems. There is no one central hub or no one cartel that is running all of the drugs for any specific drug, whether it's cocaine or heroin or marijuana or amphetamines. There is no one central place that's producing the majority of that one substance. Now, that's true for a couple of reasons, because they really don't have the size of any one cartel, any one market, is limited by their inability to use the justice system. So the justice system can be used by legal corporations to increase their size and settle disputes. So with the pharmaceutical industry, to settle patent disputes, for instance. And there's really no written records. There's no record-keeping system for any of these cartels, any of these illegal markets, because you don't want a written record of what goes on, because it's all illegal. You don't want to get in trouble. So for those reasons, it's largely decentralized, made up of large amounts of small players, literally millions of individuals, millions of small organizations. Even the large cartels are really a small organization. And because there are so many people involved, there are really large chains. They're very long chains connecting where the substance is being produced to who is actually doing the consumption. So any one person in this network may only know the person above and below themselves in the chain. They may not know the entire extent of the chain, the entire extent of the market in its entirety. So here's an example. These are opiates, essentially heroin production. And we're talking about international long-distance distribution networks. So large production countries such as Afghanistan, the products being produced there must go through intermediate countries, so other Arab countries, other Arab states, before going into the consumptive countries. So there's a difference between where the product is being consumed or where the product is being produced versus where the product is being consumed. And now that heroin can travel basically all over the world. It can go from Afghanistan all the way to the United States and Canada, whether going east or west. Heroin produced in South Asia doesn't stay in those countries, can go into China. Heroin produced in Latin America can move upwards or southwards into the United States or South America. So you can see that there are long distribution networks. There's long chains and many people that need to be connected to go from production to consumption. But even though this is a decentralized network, there is still a structure. It's not a random occurrence. So the producers still produce a product, and the product still flows to consumers. The consumers still pay for their product through money, and that money ultimately flows back to the producers. Now, this decentralized illicit drug network is good and bad from the public health perspective. Now, let's do the bad first. So the bad is that it's really resilient and highly adaptable. because there are so many players, you can eliminate the largest and it's going to have almost no impact. There's going to be someone else to step in to increase production, to fill the distribution void, and it's really hard to just completely eliminate an entirely decentralized network for an illicit substance. It's really hard to get rid of all the cocaine producers or all the heroin producers or all the marijuana growers, for instance. But because it's so decentralized, because they're a black market, because they have to stay out like in the shadows essentially and out of the light, they can't really innovate. There's no money for research and development like you see with the pharmaceutical industry, like you see with the alcohol or tobacco industries. The efficiency at which they can produce the substances decreases dramatically. Essentially, it costs a lot of money for them to produce and to distribute their product because there is no innovation or there's limited innovation. And then because there's so many people involved in the chain going from production to distribution to consumption, there's really high markups at each stage, and this will ultimately increase cost. And we'll use cost as a segue into price. So for the form of an illicit drug market does impact the price of the product, but the price of the product varies for reasons other than form itself. First is that illegal drugs are really expensive. They actually can be more expensive than an ounce of gold. So if we do some cost comparisons, a single cigarette, even in a high tax state, will cost less than $1 on average around the world. It costs about 30 cents. But a single marijuana joint will cost you about $3 to $4. So you're talking about a tenfold increase in cost just from going from tobacco to marijuana. Alcohol, to be an alcoholic, may cost you on average about $2,700 a year. But to be a heroin addict costs $25,000 a year. Again, about a tenfold increase in cost. So illegal drugs are about tenfold more expensive than legal drugs, than licit drugs. And they cost so much because the products are illegal, and because they're illegal, there are a lot of risks involved in distributing. So the distributors ask for those high markups because if they're caught, they pay a penalty. The producers ask for a high markup because if they're caught, they pay a penalty. And in some countries, those penalties can be really severe, including not only lifetime imprisonment, but death. So higher costs are associated with the higher risks involved in producing, distributing, and selling the product. Prices are not constant, though. There are a lot of variation, particularly geographic variation, based on what country the substance is produced in versus what country the substance is consumed in. So high-income countries tend to pay more for illicit drugs than low-income countries. Countries closer to the country of production, so Middle Eastern countries, compared to Afghanistan, they'll pay a lower price for heroin compared to the United States, which is on the other side of the world from the Middle East. So these geographic considerations do impact the price. Essentially, the shorter the chain between production and consumption, the lower the price. The longer the chain between production and consumption, the higher the price. And finally, we'll talk about product quality. Now, most of the products on the illegal markets, the illicit substances, are really low quality. They're actually not high quality products. This is because there are no regulations. Again, it's illegal. There's no reason to have regulations on an illegal product, and there's no reason for these cartels, the producers, to regulate themselves. And then when there's an agreement to sell something, to sell one substance, whether to a distributor or whether to an individual consumer, there's no ability to enforce any agreement on product purity. There's no way for them to use the justice system, for instance, if you get a bad batch of something, if the heroin is low quality heroin or the cocaine doesn't actually contain much cocaine. Really, the only thing you can do is fight back, but we don't really see that on so often of a basis that's a regular occurrence. So you just kind of accept that as part of the process. Also, in these illegal markets, drugs are cut with something else. They're cut to dilute the potency, and they're cut and diluted to increase the volume so they can sell more stuff. Now, what they're cut with is often completely unknown to the buyer. What the dilution ratio is often completely unknown to the buyer. And the consequences from the diluting agent because they don't know what it is, because they might not even know it's diluted, those consequences are unknown to the buyer as well. So product quality is not assured in these illegal drug markets and actually can be both quite poor and quite dangerous.